Very good morning, Srinivas. We can hear you and we can see you, and it's such
Yes,
a
sir.
pleasant thing to see you in the morning. You are
Thank you
always a
so much,
source of inspiration. आपको
sir.
देख के काम करने का जोश पैदा होता है.
Oh, thank you so much, sir. Sir, we're just waiting for Ram Sevak ji to join in, and as soon as he joins, we will commence this matter. I think it's a well-attended event.
Yes, sir.
Poonam ji, you've checked the sharing, no? PowerPoint sharing has been checked, no? And it is working.
Yeah, yes. Yes, sir. We have already. Yeah.
It has been working. Okay.
So,
Hello, Poonam ji, can you hear me?
uh,
Poonam ji, can you hear me? I just wanted to say hello to you.
hi. Good morning. Good morning,
Good
madam.
morning. Poonam ji, can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Good to see you.
Thank you so much. Same here, ma'am.
I joined today. I joined because
Oh,
I thought I may as well see what's going on. I missed the last one. So
yeah,
I didn't want to miss this one. So you
yeah.
are at work. When do you start? When do you start, Poonam ji?
But we will start right now because it's 1 or 2 minutes.
So I'll put my questions in the chat box.
Okay, you may.
I'll
Yeah.
put my questions. I watch it entirely. I
Okay.
watch the whole program entirely and put my questions on the chat box. Right?
Okay.
I'll
Okay.
do that. Okay. Best of luck. You can
Thank you.
get
Thank you so
started.
much. Thank you.
Your office in JNU, near JNU, Poonam ji?
Yeah. I'm in
You're in
office.
your office. Okay.
Yeah, I'm there already. Okay.
Morning, sir. Thank you for joining us
Morning,
today.
morning, Srinivas. Morning. I hope my audio and video is clear.
There's a bit of an echo, sir. I think I'll mute myself and it will.
Yeah, I'll also mute myself in case. I think it's hello.
Yes, sir. Now
Good morning,
it's clear,
Sharma
sir.
ji.
Okay. Sir, Mr. Kshatriya is here. You could from
Good
Bombay,
morning. Good
joining
morning,
us
sir.
from Bombay. Yes, sir. Sir, you're
Shall we
muted. You're muted.
Yeah. Good morning, Mr. Chatriya.
Professor
you, sir?
Poonam is there with us, sir.
Yes, Poonam ji.
Yeah. Good morning,
Of
sir.
course.
Namaskar.
Good morning, namaste.
नमस्कार प्रोफेसर पूनम, आज तो आप मॉडरेटर है, तो आपके ऊपर बड़ी जिम्मेदारी है.
So much, sir. So,
Last time, Srinivas, when I was in Mussoorie to address
Sir.
to the probationers, now they are called the officer trainees, OTs. शर्मा
Yes,
जी,
sir.
आपने नया नाम सुना है? वो हमने कहा भाई प्रोबेशनर्स कहाँ हैं, तो कहते प्रोबेशनर्स नहीं है, हम लोग OTs हैं. हम कहा OTs क्या होता है? तो बोले हम ऑफिसर ट्रेनीज हैं. और हम ऑफिसर ट्रेनीज से बात करने के बाद आपके नेशनल सेंटर ऑफ गुड गवर्नेंस को भी विजिट किए. And I was very happy on looking at that center, and I think that's going to be a great contribution of your Srinivas and all other people. So
Now, Srinivas
maybe-
has done a wonderful job in these governance areas. You know, even when
Yes.
he's been working in Rajasthan, you've been doing a lot of work in the revenue, and I've been kind of witnessing that. So wonderful work.
Yes. Thank you.
So, with your permission, we will commence. It is 12 o'clock now. And I'll invite Professor Poonam Singh. Please commence.
uh, good morning, everyone. Especially, I welcome all the lead speakers. We have the two lead speakers. They are very, very senior and very commendable job they have done in their field. So, welcome the Sri Ram Sevak Sharma ji and former Chairman TRI, former Secretary MITI and DG UIDAI, and Shri S.S. Kshatriya sir, Chairman Right to Service Commission, and former Chief Secretary Government of Maharashtra, my Director General Shri V. Srinivasa, Additional Secretary and Director General, National Center for Good Governance. We have invited the academicians from the reputed universities and institutes, and all the DCs. I think I am basically I have gone through the list of participants, the various district collectors who are working in the ADP districts have already joined. So welcome, and the faculties from IIMs who are working in public policy and governance, and the NCGG's faculties, and other faculties from the senior officers and all the officers from the DRPG, deputy secretaries, under secretaries, and all the person, and ladies and gentlemen. So first of all, I would like to invite and warm welcome all of you and the Joint Secretary from the DRPG. And first of all, I would like to welcome all of you on the eve of the Good Governance Day 2020. The birthday anniversary of former Prime Minister and Bharat Ratna Shri late Atal Bihari Vajpayee ji, celebrated as Good Governance Day across the country. Established in 2014, Good Governance Day aims to create awareness among the people about accountability of government and governance. So this is the occasion, because the National Center for Good Governance is organizing a series on the good governance issues, which have already designed by Shri V. Srinivas, Director General, National Center for Good Governance. So for this session, we have invited the two lead speakers and I think the very well-known person as administrators in the system. So first of all, I would like to introduce Dr. Ram Sevak Sharma. Shri Ram Sevak Sharma had joined the Indian Administrative Service in 1978. He was the chairman of Telecom Regulatory Authority of India, TRAI, during August 2015, September to 2020. He retired from this post on September 38, 2020. As chairman, he made major reforms in the sector, including the work in the area of net neutrality, data ownership, privacy and security. Dr. Sharma, as a member of Indian Administrative Service, has worked in the area of public administration since last 40 years. His earlier assignments include DG and Mission Director of the Unique Identification Authority of India, as a founding CEO for India's ID project, Aadhaar, for 4 years from 2019 to 2013. His other major assignments include working as Chief Secretary of Jharkhand, Principal Secretary of Department of Human Resource Development, Information Technology and Drinking Water and Sanitation. He was also the Joint Secretary in the Department of Economic Affairs at Government of India, looking after issues such as infrastructure financing, multilateral and bilateral economic cooperation. He has been deeply involved in the areas of e-governance since long. He is credited with introducing IT system in the area of public service delivery, such as treasuries, public grievances, office automation, land reforms, urban governance, tax reforms, transport systems, and many more. He held PhD from IIT Delhi in 2018, Masters in Computer Science from UC Raivasdai 2002, and a Master in Mathematics from IIT Kanpur 1976. So welcome, sir. Welcome in this auspicious session. And the second lead speakers I would like to introduce, Shri Swadhin S. Kshatriya, Chief Commissioner of Right to Service, Maharashtra, belongs to the 1980 batch of Indian Administrative Service. During his tenure, he held various important assignments in Maharashtra, including Vice President and CEO, Maharashtra Housing and Area Development Authority, Commissioner Sales Tax, General Manager, Brihan Mumbai Electric Supply and Transport, Principal Secretary, Housing Department, Principal Secretary to Chief Minister, Municipal Commissioner of Mumbai, and then Additional Chief Secretary, Revenue. As Commissioner, Sales Tax, he was chairman of the Committee for Classification of Commodities and the use of harmonized system of nomenclature and drafted the law for VAT system. As Principal Secretary of Housing Department, he wrote the housing policy for the state focusing on affordable housing. As Additional Chief Secretary Revenue, he prepared the policy for renewal of leases, carried out reorganization of subdivision, and introduced the Suvarna Jayanti Rajaswa Abhiyan, which received tremendous response. He was the Chief Secretary to the Government of Maharashtra from 1st August 2014 to 28 February 2017. As Chief Secretary of Maharashtra State, he has played an important role in formulating the Right to Service Act and its implementation. The Make in India event and BRICS conference organized in Mumbai were very, very successful. For ease of doing business, large number of permissions were reduced and simplified by introducing single window system. For mitigating the drought conditions, more than 5,000 villages were covered every year under the Jal Yukt Stever scheme, which emphasizes watershed development, area treatment, and creating water bodies in these villages. Similarly, an ambitious program for constructing farm ponds was undertaken. Farmers in the worst drought affected districts were provided subsidized wheat at ₹2 per kg, and rice at ₹3 per kg. Drinking water was transported by train over 300 kilometers from city of Latur. Despite the drought conditions, Maharashtra state recorded growth rate of the 8% during the year 2015-16. As a Chief Secretary of the state and chairman of the various high power committees, he gave momentum to various ambitious projects like Navi Mumbai International Project, Mumbai Trans Harbour Link, Metro Project, a very long pending project of CCTV in Mumbai, and Pune got commenced only after he sorted out issues through consistent follow-up and reviews. On 1st March 2017, Sri Swadhi Kshatriya was sworn in as the first State Chief Commissioner for Right to Service for a 5-year term. He has been entrusted with the responsibility to ensure that the Maharashtra Right to Public Service Act is implemented in letter and spirit. So thank you so much, sir, of the both leaders. And now I would like to invite our Additional Secretary DARPG and Director General National Center for Good Governance to give the introductory remarks for this auspicious session, so that we can begin the session. Thank you, sir. Welcome, sir.
Respected Shri Ramsevak Sharma ji, respected Shri S.S. Kshatriya ji, my distinguished colleagues, Department of Administrative Reforms, participating district collectors, senior faculty from over 100 universities across India, I extend a warm and hearty welcome to Sri Ramsevak Sharma ji, former Chairman TRI and India's first Director General of the Unique Identification Authority of India, and Sri S.S. Kshatriya ji, the first Chief Commissioner of the Right to Services Commission and former Chief Secretary, Government of Maharashtra, to NCGG's Good Governance Day webinar. On this occasion, we pay homage to former Prime Minister Bharat Ratna, late Shri Atal Bihari Vajpayee ji, who ranks amongst the greatest political leaders whose charisma continues to inspire the nation. Citizen-centric administration envisages that government organizations should minimize delays and maximize convenience to citizens. Further, government must define all services which are provided to citizens, set standards and norms for each service, develop capability to meet set standards, perform to achieve the standards, and monitor performance against set standards. The impact through an independent mechanism and continuous improvement based on monitoring and evaluation results. The efficiency of a government organization is best judged by the responsiveness to provide high-quality services within a prescribed time. The use of technology tools can help make such system more accessible to citizens. It is difficult to envisage life in India without an Aadhaar number. India has shown the world how identity projects are done, and several projects have been built around the identity architecture. Aadhaar remains the foundation of a citizen's empowerment and emphasizes the citizen's needs are first and foremost. In India's digital world, Aadhaar-enabled applications have become absolutely essential to authenticate a citizen's identity. The JAM Trinity enabled many cashless and paperless services being delivered to India's citizens. Sri Ramsevak Sharma ji has been a tireless crusader for Aadhaar. He has fought a number of battles that needed to be fought and won, and established the resilience of Aadhaar, ensuring that it found universal acceptability. His latest book, The Making of Aadhaar, depicts the epic journey of Aadhaar from registration to its manifold uses. Sri R.S. Sharma ji will be addressing the NCGG Good Governance webinar on citizen-centric administration, Aadhaar-based services. The Nagpur resolution of 2019 adopted by DARPG said that it shall seek to empower citizens through better service delivery, through timely updation of citizens' charters, implementation of enactments, benchmarking of standards for continuous improvement. The DARPG has sought to adopt a holistic approach of systemic public grievance reforms through improved mapping, formulation of monitoring indices, data collection, and evaluation and quality of grievance redressal. The DARPG has also sought to provide an enabling environment for states and ministries for creating integrated web portals for adopting a holistic approach through improved service delivery. There has also been efforts to promote exchange of technical expertise in areas of improved service delivery between the partner states under the Ek Bharat Shresth Bharat campaign. Sri S.S. Kshatriya ji was the driving force for the successful conduct of the National Conference on Improved Service Delivery and Role of Governments at Nagpur. As a practicing administrator, he is uniquely qualified to address the NCGG's Good Governance Day webinar on citizen-centric administration with focus on improved service delivery. With these introductory remarks, I welcome Sri Ramsevak Sharma ji to kindly deliver his address on this occasion. Thank you very much, sir, for accepting our invitation.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Srinivas, and thanks, Professor Poonam Singh, for very generous introduction to about me. It is really my privilege to talk to my colleagues, the collectors and various administrators. I'm also privileged to be sharing this stage, though virtually, with Mr. Kshatriya, who has done tremendous work in Maharashtra. We all know about it. So I today I think Mr. Srinivas has told me to talk about Aadhaar-based service delivery. Now, what I thought was that this becomes a little bit of a constraining topic in the sense that you talk of one particular artifact and the talk of service delivery. I would rather like to focus a little on a sort of a more higher plane of talking as to how India has created multiple tools which can actually help us in better governance. So I think rather than talking about Aadhaar per se as one of the tools, I'll talk about how India has leapfrogged on many of these parameters, many of these tools. And today we have a suite of tools which actually can be leveraged to deliver governance. We are also aware that many of the governance reforms were started by the collectors. Generally, that is what we have been seeing, that district magistrates, when they are working in the district, they really feel the pain points of the citizens, and then they start as to how they can solve the problem. And technology has emerged as one of the good tools to solve these problems, and then they started these efforts, and then thereafter these efforts over a period of time got institutionalized, and what we collectively started calling them e-governance. So then they became a little more standardized. For example, some people started treasury computerization, and slowly it all became more or less a standard software for treasury computerization. NIC took it over and started doing. So I think that's the way the history of e-governance has started. But lately, what we have also done is essentially develop applications which are multi-tenant applications, which actually a single application hosting multiple stuff. For example, people don't like me for the same purpose. We started what is called an attendance.gov.in, attendance portal, and that is based on Aadhaar authentication. And today, about 4 million people in the whole country are actually using that software. It's a single software. It is hosted at NIC in Delhi, but it is being used by various state governments. They just have to, sort of create a login for themselves and, put in some basic reference databases, and it starts working. So from a standalone system of various types of e-governance reforms, today we have moved to a very, very generic and multi-tenancy systems, enterprise systems, which actually can host multiple databases. As you know, computation and connectivity has grown substantially, and the result today is that you can have a single application hosted and you can have multiple databases, and we have the processing power to actually process billions of records in no time, and that's where the power lies. And I think the new paradigm of e-governance should be to actually create such scalable applications which can deliver governance at a massive scale. So let me just share with you the presentation I had made. Of course, one could do without presentation also, but I thought maybe just to kind of keep the focus in the next 15-20 minutes that I'll be just talking to you on how India has digitally leapfrogged. So here I share the screen. I hope it is visible, friends. Visible? Okay. So this I'm saying it's a blueprint for governance in 21st century. So one is India has created digital platforms as public goods. And this I think is very, very important, because if you look, digital identity, for example, Aadhaar is not really like any other identity system anywhere in the world. Aadhaar is world's first digital identity, and it is an identity without eligibility, which means identity which does not have any rights associated with it. So much so that this identity does not even provide citizenship proof. So basically, it's a bare identity. It says X is X. And why is that important? That becomes important because every domain requires identity proof as the first point of entry. You go anywhere, you will be asked, who are you? Prove that you are who you claim to be. And therefore, that is the most common problem of all domains. So like you have in mathematics, what is called greatest common divisor or the highest common factor. That highest common factor is the factor which is, there present in every domain. And we have solved that identity problem as a highest common factor. Now the banks can open a bank account just on the basis of an identity proof provided by UID Authority of India. The mobile companies can provide a SIM to you on the basis of the electronic KYC provided by Aadhaar. So all these services can now leverage, and it's a digital identity, which means it can be plugged anywhere. So we have created digital platforms as public goods. Public goods by very nature are those kinds of artifacts which don't get reduced when they are used more. The more you use them, the more useful they become. So as I said, Aadhaar has enrolled 1.24 billion or 99% of the adult population across India. And at the height of Aadhaar, enrollment, we were enrolling 2 million people per day. And all of your predecessors, collectors in the field were actually involved in enrollment in Aadhaar. And that actually has scaled in 5.5 years to 1 billion. No database in the world has scaled that fast in that much period. People, Facebook has taken 15 years, Microsoft Windows have taken more than 25 years to become 1 billion. So I don't think there's any database, especially a government database, which has scaled so much. All the databases which have even scaled to 1 billion are private databases. Similarly, as Srinivas rightly mentioned, JAM, Janadhan, Aadhaar and mobile. In 2015, the government realized that there are three things which can be combined and it can be constructed as a trinity, which is a very powerful trinity. We have the tradition of trinities in this country, Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh, and all kinds of other trinities also. So essentially, we realize that Janadhan as an account which can be opened using Aadhaar electronic KYC. If we can provide accounts to everybody, then we would have provided a receptacle to everybody to receive subsidies, to receive benefits directly. That's one part. And secondly, if we have mobile and link that mobile with the identity, then mobile becomes an extremely effective communication system. So you have an identity, you have a receptacle, and you have a channel of communication mobile. This JAM becomes an extremely powerful trinity, and using that, we had used 582 million unique bank account holders, and this is actually a little dated figure of 2 years back. We had 300 million Janadhan accounts in September of 2017. So today 81% of India's adults have bank accounts, which means almost everybody has a bank account, which becomes a very powerful tool to transfer subsidy. Then, of course, other parameters also I want to share with you. You have 1.22 billion Aadhaar. We created actually unified payment interface, a very, a kind of language of payment transfer, money transfer language. So that language actually provided a great interface, and all biggies of the world, Googles and, PhonePe and all those fellows, they have now gotten to even Paytm, they have got on to this UPI. And by the way, UPI is transacting, they transacted 2 billion transactions in a month, October 2020. This is more than all the debits and credits and all kinds of cards combined together. We have large number of internet users, we have registered businesses. So I think we are going digital. India is really, leapfrogging from an offline world to a completely online world. And therefore, what Professor Poonam Singh said, the net neutrality becomes very important, because then internet becomes a platform, an open platform for innovation. Now, other things which are very important from India's perspective is we have provided layered, interoperable and frugal innovations. So basically, it's not a vertical solution of a problem. A problem is divided into manageable parts, and those manageable parts are solved. And then they are combined together using what is called open APIs, open connectors. So essentially, it's like Legos. You build Legos, you build some bricks, some pieces, and then you can create any solution. Using these Legos, which are used and connected in a well-defined fashion, what is called the APIs. That's one part. Other is interoperability comes from APIs. And frugal, the most important part is it is frugal. It's really cheap. Now, what's important is it is cheap doesn't mean that it is compromised. Cheap doesn't mean that it is non-robust. Cheap also has robustness in it. So essentially, imagine total money spent on Aadhaar thus far is about 8,000 crores. Aadhaar in one single year saved 91,000 crores, as per the statement of our then Honorable Finance Minister, Mr. Arun Jaitley, in the Parliament. So this is the return on investment, so to say. 8,000 crores total money is spent for a 7-year life cycle to combine authentication and all services, and we saved 91,000 crores directly. This is the power of the frugal innovations, interoperable innovations, and layered innovations. Now, we created an identity layer. Now, the mandate of UIDAI was only to create identity. But because in the process of creating identities, we collected biometrics because that was the only way to ensure uniqueness. So what happened was, once you have biometrics, then we realized, why can't we authenticate people? So we created an authentication service. Now, this is very powerful because then it enables you to prove your identity in a remote manner, anytime, anywhere. So this is what it is. And we did not create a card, we just created a number. Using that number and your biometrics, you can prove that you are who you claim to be. Now, that is very, very powerful authentication. By the way, total number of authentications which have taken place in this country by now is 33 billion, which means each Aadhaar holder on an average has authenticated himself or herself 33 times over in the last 10 years. So this is the scale of authentication which is going, and the system at the back end is capable of handling 10 million authentications per hour. That's the scalability. So therefore, this is going on, and the numbers are increasing very fast. Now, we also created the paradigm of paperless, presence-less, and cashless. So authentication, for example, provides a paperless way of opening bank accounts, of transactions. Similarly, presence-less, you don't need to be there to actually prove your ID. You can do it remotely. And you can actually draw ration. Many of you are familiar that you are using in PDS, you are using Aadhaar authentication. And in fact, you are using Aadhaar authentication and DBT in your NREGA programs in the field, in your national social assistance programs, and many other programs. So we have created a paperless, presence-less, and cashless. Cashless because now we are going digital in the payment systems. We are going digital in the opening of bank accounts. So this is the other part. Aadhaar, actually, this identity enables presence-less and paperless verification, electronic KYC, and authentication. Similarly, Aadhaar also provides a universal financial address, which means you just give the Aadhaar number and the system at the back end will take care to ensure that the money goes into the account of the same person, the person with the Aadhaar. That actually provides an extremely powerful way of reaching in a frictionless way to the people at the last mile. Now that's again very, very powerful. And this happens because you give the file to NPCI, NPCI figures out which Aadhaar number has got account, which bank, just a bank, it doesn't know the account number. And then the money goes to the bank figures out what is the account number of this Aadhaar holder and deposits the money therein. So that's how it works. So therefore, you have created a number of layers. One is presence-less layer, Aadhaar authentication, paperless, Aadhaar KYC, e-sign. You have created a digital signature on demand. Now you don't need any dongles to digitally sign the paper. We have created digital locker as a part of Digital India. Our Prime Minister said that we want to have a public, private space on a public cloud. So you have digital locker, and you have 3.3 billion documents on digital locker today. You have cashless layer, you have UPI, you have Aadhaar payment bridge, you have Aadhaar enabled payment systems, and you have immediate payment systems. Similarly, what is also happening is that India is the first country which has actually deployed a consent artifact, which is basically a digital token which can provide, which actually you can verify that I have given my consent to share some data. And on that basis, we have a DAPA, that is basically Data Empowerment and Protection Architecture, which essentially enables me to use my own data for getting credit or for getting loans and for other kinds of things. So those people who do not have a credit history, but if they have a digital footprint of some kind, they will be able to take advantage of DAPA architecture. Reserve Bank of India has already, given license to 2 account aggregators who will be able to, take the credit history or other transaction history from the banks or other institutions and provide to the banks or other institutions which the individual person requires. So this identity infrastructure is impacting, all these statistics you can imagine. We are having more than 2 billion the DBT transactions every year. As you know, the LPG subsidy is going through direct benefit transfer. Many other things are going to direct benefit transfer. So we have these layers: authentication, identity, payment, and paperless. UPI has clocked 2 billion transactions, and actually it's such a beautiful, set of protocols, because it is universally interoperable, which means from any bank to any bank, to any wallet to any bank, to any instrument to any instrument in some sense. And it's more or less free, and it is instantaneous, and it doesn't require me to give my bank account details. I can give my, like an email, I can give my address saying that RS Sharma at ICICI, that's all. Similarly, I can give my mobile phone number, that itself will be able to transfer money. So it's single payment address, virtual address, minimal issuer acquired cost, mobile first payment. These are things which India has done, and now UPI is going places. I believe Singapore, Philippines, a number of other countries it's going. Similarly, Aadhaar is going to, North Africa, for example, Morocco. I had myself gone to Morocco and talked, and now they have a $200 million World Bank project doing Aadhaar type of structure. Philippines is doing the similar structure. Indonesia, Malaysia has had my card, and now they are going in for Aadhaar type of. So I think it has now, we can have a digital diplomacy being of our part. UPI, I explained to you. Digital locker, again, I told you, you may be familiar. You can have a driving license. You can actually digitally sign the documents. It provides the electronic signature system. Then we are focused on governance, enabling an ecosystem. That's what we have done. We have these statistics actually clearly demonstrate to you as to how these things have scaled up. The consent layer I talked about is 3.5 billion digital documents. E-signatures, we have done 33 billion, and there are e-signature providers. So what is required, friends, at the district level, while I believe that there should be, enterprise level solutions to all the problems at the district level, I still feel that there are innovators in our districts. The people, the district magistrate or the collectors are the persons who actually are nearest to the problems of the people, and they are the ones who can actually innovate. So we should not close innovation just because some enterprise stuff is being developed. We must continue to have innovations, because I still feel that there is a lot which needs to be done. For example, Mr. Srinivas has done such a wonderful work in the revenue space. Now, revenue is the oldest administration in this country. Revenue and law and order, these are the two priority areas of the British government, and they have developed all kinds of revenue systems, permanent settlement in Bihar, Bengal, and Odisha, Rayatwari system somewhere else. In Bombay Presidency, some other things I'm sure Mr. Kshatriya will be able to tell us. So I think everywhere you still have a lot of these stuff going on. Mutations, process is different, record of rights, permanent settlement, all these systems, and they are the systems which touch the poor people at the village level. And therefore, we must not forget that there is still, e-governance is a continuing process. We can't say that we have just arrived and nothing needs to be done. We are not into the kind of nirvana of e-governance. We are still doing it. We are still developing, and there are systems which can be automated, which can be done. Now, what can happen is these tools will help you in reaching there. Well, thank you very much, friends. I feel that our approach to digital infrastructure will help us in leapfrogging our most important societal problem, because I think it's a technology which actually can solve most of the problems of the country, not all of, certainly not all, but many problems can be solved by right use of technology. And that, disintermediates people, it removes information asymmetry, it creates democratization of information and other things. So I think that's what is going to hold us in high sort of esteem. This is what is going to hold us together, and this is what is going to take us further from here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. I think for a Good Governance Day lecture, we could not have had anybody more eminent than you speaking about the transformation Aadhaar has brought into our lives and how much citizens' lives have changed because of it. Let me also invite the second speaker in today's webinar, Sri S.S. Kshatriya. May I now invite you to kindly deliver your address, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Srinivas, and thank you so much for the National Center for Good Governance having organized this web seminar today on the occasion of the Good Governance Day. We just heard Mr. Sharma, who has done wonderful work, and I think the country history is going to remember his contribution towards introducing all the digital platforms and the Aadhaar system. My coincidence is that I'm going to just carry forward what has just been presented by Mr. Sharma. The question is that we have created all these digital platforms and we have used the revolution of information technology, but how do we carry it forward to actual delivery of public services to the citizens? That's the question which I'm trying to address today in this presentation that I'm making. I also understand that in addition to the collectors and the district magistrates, we are connected today to about 100 universities. That's what I read in the letter from the National Center, and that faculty members from the faculties of public administration, political science, sociology, and also Indian Institute of Management are connected today. So I would welcome all of them in this participation, in addition to all the practical administrators. What I would try to do in about 25 minutes presentation is divide my presentation into three parts. I'm going to focus on citizen-centric governance. How do you improve service delivery and what experience we have had in the state of Maharashtra. So the first slide you will see is regarding the act that Maharashtra has enacted, which is called the Maharashtra Right to Public Services Act. So the first part of the presentation is going to be why this act is necessary. Because despite creating all digital platforms, unless you create a legal right to the citizen that this service will be provided to me within a stipulated period of time, the citizen is not going to really benefit of all these innovations and all these systems that we have developed. And it also requires a complete mindset. I would say a game changer. Because if you see the logo and if you see the tagline of our act, your service is our duty. Now that's a very big change. And this logo and this tagline, I'm very happy to say, has come from citizens. We held a competition amongst them. And we said, what do you think this act is all about? And they said, we want the government now to say that your service is our duty and not any favor. And the logo also indicates how citizens are happy if they are provided service. So next slide, if we see, I'm going to briefly tell you a little bit about the objectives of the Act, which of course are very apparent, that this Act requires complete transparency in providing services. Essentially, the objective is how can we provide these services to the citizens in a hassle-free manner and not requiring the citizen to run from pillar to post. And the best part will be that the citizen should not be required to come to any office. He should be able to ask for a service sitting at home using the information technology, and we should be able to deliver it without his requiring to come to any office. So transparency comes about if we use information technology. We will see how this actually did. Accountability. whatever you may do, unless you are going to hold the administrators and the people who are going to deliver service accountable, reward them if they do good work and punish them if they fail to deliver it in time. So this act of Maharashtra ensures accountability. It provides for reward system. It provides for incentives as well as punishment. Timeliness is very important. What the citizens want is that when they apply for anything to the government, please give a decision within a stipulated period of time. They know that not every request or every application will be agreed upon, but their problem is कि हम निर्णय नहीं देते हैं. So this act says that for every service there's a time limit which has been laid down. So timeliness is very important, efficiency, and the use of information technology, which we just heard so eloquently from Mr. Sharma, as to how, and the act mandates, section 7 of the act. And for those who want to see the act and the rules and regulation, I would request that they can go to our website called Aaple Sarkar. It's a very beautiful name. Aaple Sarkar का मतलब होता है सरकार आपकी है. आप माने या ना माने, सरकार आपकी है. aaplesarkar.mahaonline.gov.in. And it is bilingual site, both English and Marathi. So you can read our act, you can read our rules, you can read our annual report, what has been achieved in the last 3 to 5 years. So the next slide is regarding the salient features of the act. So the next slide says that the act creates a right to an eligible person. This is very important. The right is something which is legally created, therefore it is enforceable. Otherwise, it remains merely a charter. It remains like a New Year's resolution or a wish कि भाई ये देना है. But there is no right which is created unless you pass an act. Then it provides for delivery of public services by designated officer. Now, designated officer is a very important person, because the problem in government for the citizen is that when he applies, he doesn't know who's going to really deal with this subject. And everywhere he's told कि this doesn't pertain to me. So every service which is notified declares who's going to be the designated officer. That means you should know who is the person to whom you will be putting your application and who is responsible for delivery. Then it mandates that public authorities should notify services, designated officers and appellate. And how is the service notified? It is notified through a gazette which is published by the government of Maharashtra. And it provides for a unique application. The moment an application is made, a unique application or receipt is generated, which gives the time and the date when the service will be delivered. So much is the transparency. And it provides for the first, second and third appellate, first and second appellate authorities are within the department, the senior officers. For example, if the Tahsildar is the designated officer, first appeal will lie with the subdivisional officer and the second appeal with the additional collector. Third and final appeal lies with the commission. And we have provided appeals to be also filed online. They don't have to seek lawyers and present voluminous documents. By the press of a button, in 2 cases the appeals can be filed. First, in the case that there is a delay. I was to be given this service in 7 days. I've been waiting for 10 days. It has not been provided. So he'll press a button and the appeal goes up. And the second reason why an appeal can be filed is that the rejection, my application has been rejected, but no reasons have been given for rejection, or the reasons given are not justifiable. They are arbitrary. They are malified. Next slide. Another important feature of the act is that it sets up a commission, and therefore the commission has been set up. Why commission? Because commission is an independent body. The chief commissioner and the commissioners are appointed by the governor, and the commission prepares an annual report which is presented to the legislature. It is tabled in Vidhan Sabha and Vidhan Parishad, and the recommendations of the commission, the shortcomings highlighted by the commission, are debated in the legislature. So no government department, no public authority is going to take it in a light manner. It has to take it very seriously. Then, as I said, the act also provides for penalties, disciplinary action against what we call as habitual defaulters or repeated defaulters. And it also provides for incentives to be given when there is a good performance which is noticed. And it also provides that if people seek service by presenting false document, action can be taken against that applicant also. Now, next slide is regarding what are the powers of the commission and what are the functions of the commission. The commission can take suo motu notice, not necessary that people have to complain. It can carry out inspection of offices, so it's very vast powers. It can recommend departmental inquiry. It can recommend changes in procedure. Now, that's very important. And we will see how we have recommended and certain changes have taken place, and monitor delivery of public authorities. And most important, of course, hearing appeals is also important. And the last one is that it has to present an annual report. So the last annual report, which was presented for the year 2018-19, is available in public domain. You can look at our website and see the annual report, which is also available in English and Marathi. Now, this is the act which is there, and there is a commission. Now, how does actually it operate on the field? That part I'm going to come next slide. Now, how does it operate? Under this act, 486 services have been notified. 37 departments have notified, you can say, about 500 services. There is a debate, why should a service be required to be notified? But the act as it stands today is that not all services are covered. First of all, let me make it clear that this act is an act enacted by the Vidhan Sabha and Vidhan Parishad, so it covers only the services provided by the state government. Secondly, only those notified services. So there was a lot of debate because people are saying, why have you selected? Why has the government selected some services and not selected some? After hearing so many representations, I have recommended to the government of Maharashtra that this distinction needs to be done away with. All services should be within the ambit of this act. All services must have accountability, transparency, and efficiency, and so on. But as of today, 486 have been notified. And these notified services are also available on our site. Now, how can citizens get these services without going to the office of the government? Well, they can use, first of all, they can use our mobile app, which is called RTS Maharashtra. Now, this mobile app can be downloaded free of cost on any phone, whether it is Android or whether it is iPhone, and it is again bilingual. Or we have an Aple Sarkar RTS portal, which I have just mentioned. This portal has become very popular. And I'm very happy to say that not only citizens of Maharashtra, but people residing in Canada, United Kingdom, USA have been using this platform. Our students, when they go there, they often require certain documents like mark sheet and some certificate, transfer certificate. They have been applying from there. They often require a birth certificate for some reason. And we have been providing them those services online without their requiring to come to any office. Then another thing we have done is that the business process reengineering has been carried out, and every service has to be decided within 3 tables. Otherwise, in government, it often happens that a service will require concurrence of so many authorities. So there is a 3-table system. In 3 desks, the decision has to be taken. It cannot go to the 4th desk. And the entire process is electronic. There's no physical movement. The system is transparent. Citizen can track his application. I think this is the most wonderful thing. ये पहले नहीं होता था. You see, पहले government was a great mystery. The common man, once he gave the application, had no right to know what is happening inside. Now today, once he applies, he is able to track his application, whether it has gone to table 1, table 2, table 3, what remarks have been put, and when it has been decided. So that's the advantage this citizen has. Then immediately upon application, receipt is generated, which is a UID, and the date on which the service is provided. Now look at this transparency. Earlier, people never knew as to when the service will be available, and therefore they used to write words like मेहरबान जिलाधिकारी को ये निवेदन दिया जाता है. तो अब ये लिखने की जरूरत ही नहीं है, क्योंकि उनको बताया जाएगा कि कौन से दिनांक को उनको सर्विस मिलेगी. Final delivery is also online, and facility is also available for online appeals, which I have just mentioned. Next slide. Mr. Sharma has rightly mentioned that the collectors are carrying out tremendous innovations, and that's been my experience also. Even after this act and in the implementation, I was convinced that collectors will have to be made responsible for implementation of this act. So we got government orders issued saying that collectors would be the controlling authority for the purposes of Right to Services Act. for the district. Now, what is the result of collectors being made the controlling authority? Look at the innovations. Chandrapur collector involved the women self-help group in centers. We have, I forgot to mention, we have about 32,000 centers in Maharashtra. For those people who cannot apply themselves online, we have opened these centers, a chain of 32,000 centers which are all outsourced, where people can go. Those centers at a cost of rupees 20, and now because GST has come, 23 rupees 60 paise, उस पे भी शर्मा जी GST लग गया है सर्विस के ऊपर. तो 23 rupees 60 पैसे में आपको सर्विस दी जाती है. So these centers have been handed over in Chandrapur to women self-help group. And I went down to Chandrapur to see what happened. And I found that the women self-help group are doing wonderful work. They have been given training. They are wearing a uniform. They have become confident. They are handling it very well. So that innovation is there. Wardha, the collector, selected what are known, he applied a footfall theory. And he said, yeah, I have applied this footfall theory and set up centers even at places like civil hospital, at a bus terminal. I went around and I saw there is a huge response to these centers. So that's another innovation he has done. Nasik collector went beyond the government notification and identified another 83 number of additional services. And Ahmednagar district collector, what he has done is he has put important documents in a machine. And he said, sir, why do you want the process to start after an application? He said, I am going to do away with the need for an application. He has introduced a touch screen model. आप screen को touch करके you should be able to get the documents that you want. So he has put about 12 or 13 kinds of documents. So collectors, I fully agree, are very innovative in their approach, and we need to continue that. The next slide is regarding the digital signatures, which Mr. Sharma has elaborately explained to us. Now look at the speed. Because of the digital signatures, we are able, it has a capacity of 10,000 signatures in 1 minute. So what used to take months and what used to be a laborious, monotonous and physically tiring exercise for the officers has now been all made so easy. And the officers are very proud to use digital signature, and it, of course, this digital signature uses the hardware security model, and the biometric machine is used, and it has greater security also. All signatures are stored in the HSM server and the state data center. So digital signature is another revolution which has taken place, and the speed of delivering services has increased tremendously. Next slide. This is the digital workflow of how end-to-end process is online, that once the applicant, first thing, once the applicant has to register, एक बार ही registration करना है उसको. और registration करने के लिए हमने क्या किया है? We have said कि you share your Aadhaar number. If he shares Aadhaar number, no more questions are asked. But there are some people, a very small, minuscule minority, who have hesitation in sharing Aadhaar number. They have to fill in some information. Once you are registered, you may come 200 times to get various services. You are not required to register again and again because your profile gets created. And then the application form, he has to fill in and upload the document. Then it goes to the verification process, and the decision is given by the DO is the designated officer. Either he rejects it or he approves it. But before rejection, there is an option that he will point out to the applicant what are the shortcomings. And if he complies with it, he can still have it approved. When I present the figures, we'll look at it. The rejection ratio has been negligible. It has been below 1%. 99% services have been provided, and that's a matter of great satisfaction. Next slide over there. Now, I had mentioned that there are 30, this is a little outdated figure, but it is 30,878 according to the last annual report. It is now around 32,000 Aple Sarkar Seva Kendra. These are all outsourced. And what I want to emphasize here is they are not only in urban areas. Out of 30,000, 17,212 centers are at the Gram Panchayat level. So even the villages are getting this kind of a service and facility. And from all these centers, papers are sent to the competent authority electronically. There is no physical movement of papers. Now, 2 minutes, I would like to pause as to what kind of services have been covered. Let me give you some examples. Now, as I said, 37 departments, even departments like the home department has been. Normally, we think of home department as a regulatory department, but now home department is also playing the role of a service department. They have also introduced so many. For example, if you need permission for any manoranjanache कार्यक्रम means entertainment program, or you require an NOC for a petrol pump, for a gas agency, for a hotel, for a bar, or you want a weapon permission, you want, of course, passport is very famous. We all know that. All these kind of dhvani shape means a loudspeaker permission, or you want to take out sabha, sammelan, mironok, hold a rally, this thing. All these permissions are now online and you can apply online. Of course, the biggest number of services which have been notified are coming from the revenue department because people have to deal with the revenue department on a very large number of matters. These include the certificates of age, nationality, domicile, caste, income certificate, non-creamy layer, Jyeshta Nagrik means senior citizen, and all kinds of your land records, including your, mention was made about the mutations, measurement of land. I remember there were permanent complaints about measurement of land. That measurement of land doesn't take place within any specified period, but not now. Even for land measurement, there is a stipulated period within which it has to be done. So these are the kind of services. And even urban development, because now 50% of the population in the state is living in urban areas. So urban development has notified services like drinking water. You want a connection for drinking water, connection for electricity. You want to start a construction, so building permission. You have completed your building, you want to occupy, you need an occupation certificate. All this is now to be done online and no need for going to any office. So these are various kinds of, and all departments, right from agriculture, animal husbandry, women and child, cooperation, all departments have notified services. Yeah. Next slide. And now there is a single platform. Now this is very important because citizens should not be required to go to different platforms for different services. So there is only one single platform called the Aaple Sarkar. That's the single platform to which they have to go. And we have, it covers all districts, all departments, all services, and all delivery channels. And we have used what is known as an enterprise architect model. Now, Government of India has developed certain modules which we have been able to integrate. Now that I would like to mention to Srinivas, if he can help. We wrote to Government of India, various departments who have developed separate modules. We want to be integrated with our single platform. Permission has come from the Government of India to integrate Sarthi, Vahan, which are the transport department modules, DigiLocker and UID, eKYC, but permission for certain other, for example, I'm told that agriculture has, agriculture department and some other department have certain modules which have not been allowed to be integrated. So if we can have integration, that also can be thought of. But our policy is to have a single platform. The next slide. What we do is, how do we make departments accountable, answerable, and create a healthy competition? We evaluate the departments. Every month we are carrying out an evaluation and we rank the department on the basis of their performance. How good you have been in delivery of public services. And this is done on a monthly basis. We have devised a simple color scheme called the red, amber, and green. If your performance is excellent, you are in the green category. If it is a good performance, you are in amber. And if you are in a poor performance, you are in the red category. Now, how I would say that it has created a healthy competition is that if you look at the figures of what is happening in the red category department, in 2015-18, the Commission identified 23 departments which were in the red category. In 2018-19, the figure came down to 13 departments, 13. And in 2019-20, it came down to 12 departments. Now, this analysis and evaluation of every department is given in detail in an annual report which is presented to the legislature and it's debated over there. So this is the evaluation and ranking which we have done. The next slide is regarding the national conference, which Srinivas has made a mention, in which about 21 states participated. And I am very happy that we were able to adopt a Nagpur resolution and recommended to the Government of India that it needs to be carried forward. I think that we need to think of having this kind of an enactment, this kind of a commission to oversee its implementation, even at the pan-India level. Many states don't have this kind of a system. They will benefit from this. The next one. So to sum up, I would quote next slide. To sum up, I would just quote the figure that since the Act came into effect somewhere around October, November 2015, we have received online applications to the tune of about 9 crore 21 lakhs. Now that's the number, staggering number it has received. But what is more important is, Srinivas and Mr. Sharma and all participants, that from the period of lockdown, look at this second bullet. From the period of lockdown, April 2020, we have received 95 lakh applications. 95 lakh 22,933 applications, of which 86 lakh 50,702 applications have been disposed of. 90%. तो लॉकडाउन के बावजूद ये काम जारी रहा. That's the. Now the rejection ratio is less than 1%. I can give you all the figures of the rejection ratio. It has never been 1%. It has been 0.4 in 2015-16, 0.7 in 17-18, 0.6. So the rejection ratio is negligible. That means most of the services are provided and given. Therefore, I would say and end up by saying that the transparent and efficient and time-bound delivery of public services has been ensured by 1, enacting the legislation, 2, establishing the commission, and by using information technology. If we combine the 3 in a holistic fashion, then you are able to provide better delivery of services. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you very much, sir. We have greatly benefited from listening to you. In fact, the numbers are very striking. 95 citizens have benefited, 30,000 Aple Sarkar Service Center, 17,000 in Gram Panchayat. It's a massive effort that's been undertaken. Let me open the floor for discussion. And Professor Kumki wanted to raise a question. She is the senior professor at Department of Public Administration at the Jamia Millia Islamia University. May I give the floor to Professor Kumki, please? And then we have 3-4 others who have requested for speaking slots. Yes, Professor.
Right. Can you hear me, please?
Yes, we can hear you.
Can you hear? First of all, let me congratulate both the speakers for 2 excellent presentations. I must confess my ignorance regarding the data that was given by R.S. Sharma ji. It was really an eye-opener to me that so much has already happened regarding the identity project and how widely it's penetrated the administrative system and how much it's contributing to citizen empowerment. I just have one question for him. It was an excellent presentation. So much has come out in the public domain because of what he said. We didn't know so much. What I would like to know is what exactly today, are the privacy issues? Are there any that is being debated, or do we take it as a complete success as far as a tool of service delivery is concerned? Are there no further issues that need to be debated? That's number one question for Sharma ji. The second presentation by Kshatriya, Shri Kshatriya was, I heard him with a lot of attention because I have done some kind of groundwork on these acts. And if you could update me, how many states now have passed these acts? I thought there are about 20, maybe more have, acts have been passed. A couple of questions for him. I would like to know whether in most states, I don't know, in the case of Maharashtra, you said almost 500 services have been added. And still there are some more which could be added, which was your recommendation. What about the other states? Are they Is it the number of services being added? Is it a progression, or you see them freezing somewhere? You don't get to see more services being added. Secondly, what about penalizing errant officials? You have an appeal system, but have you really penalized errant officials? That's something I'm curious about. And the third important question, why is there no overarching central act so far? We keep hearing about states, passing these acts. Is there, I would like you to tell us, is there any overarching central act? Or will it be one of those innovations, a wonderful innovation to my mind, which has really transformed the public service delivery systems in India? So just these queries, sir, if you could tell us.
Ma'am, before we give the floor to the lead discussants, I have two more requests for questions. Professor Srinivas Pati from Mizoram University has requested for a speaking slot. Professor Pati, could you please be brief and flag your questions?
Okay. Thank you so much. Am I audible, Mr. Srinivas? Am I audible?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
So let me combine just a very small query. Mr. Khetria talked about this minuscule minority who would not like to give the Aadhaar number, and exact linking it to Mr. Sharma's presentation. That very interesting thing he told, that consent. India is the only country where the people have given consent that my data to be used. Actually, this is a news for all of us, because as a teacher, I feel out of 1.24 billion people who are enrolled in Aadhaar, maybe less than 0.1% would know what is this consent all about. So maybe they can link the minuscule minority in Maharashtra, those who do not want to give the Aadhaar number for service delivery, and Mr. Sharma's idea that we have some law for consent, that all of us have given consent that my data to be used, and even by the third parties. So this takes care of Madam Rumti Basu's idea of privacy, data security, data breach, these things. Plus, what is the major issue? So I think even Mr. Sharma can highlight. So this consent thing a little bit intriguing for common people like us. So if he can highlight, that will be excellent. Thank you so much for giving opportunity. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. May I give the floor to Professor Dr. Arish Sharma ji, please?
Yes, thank you very much. And I think the questions are extremely important questions. And I think the privacy issue has been continuously raised since we started doing Aadhaar in 2009. The civil society groups, they said Aadhaar will create a surveillance structure, Aadhaar will violate privacy, Aadhaar will, create data security breaches, and all kinds of, issues have been raised. We were careful, actually, that in 2009, there was no privacy law. There's no data protection law as such. And if there is no law, you really do not know whether you are complying with something which does not exist. You can comply with a given law, because law is the one which actually lays the boundary lines as to what is forbidden and what is allowed. But if there is no law, then you can always raise that, this thing violates privacy, because you don't know what privacy is. So what happened was that we were careful enough. So one is we wrote, our chairman, Mr. Nandan Nilekani, wrote in 2010 May to the then Prime Minister, Dr. Manmohan Singh, that while we are taking care to ensure privacy and data protection in Aadhaar, there is no overarching privacy law in this country and data protection law, and therefore there is a need to have such a law. So much so that we also enclosed, along with our letter, a number of countries and their legal frameworks related to privacy and data protection. That law, was debated in the same department which you are there, Mr. Srinivas, in the Department of Personnel and Training, and this has been going on and on and on, and now, of course, we have now the data protection law pending before Parliament of this country. Now, what happened was that we took 2-3 things. There is a concept of privacy by design. So when you design a project, you incorporate all the privacy protecting, privacy enhancing technologies, as they are called PETs. So for example, Aadhaar as a random number itself is the first step which we ensured that from looking at Aadhaar number, you can't figure out as to whether it's a number of a male or a female, young or old, which place he or she belongs. It's a random number. And you can't even guess a random number because the random number space is 100 billion, 12-digit number, 11 of them are real numbers, and 10 to the power 11 will be the total number of space, which is 100 billion. So the density of that number line is just 1.2, as they are 1.2 billion. So actually we took these steps, and there were other steps also. Data is always encrypted. Data at rest is encrypted. We take consent of the person, where as soon as a person does an authentication, he is informed by SMS on his mobile that you have attempted an authentication and that authentication has been a success or a failure. If you have provided email, we put it on the email also. So I think we took all these steps. So what happened was that when in 2015, 2014, when the issue was raised in Supreme Court, and there, the whole thing was PILs, number of PILs were filed, and then the whole, debate started. This was the longest running case in Supreme Court, second longest running, I believe, 58 straight sittings, and then they decided that, which is the law which Aadhaar violates. So they said there's no law of the privacy. And then the question was, well, if there's no law, but if a privacy is a fundamental right, then of course we could figure out that whether Aadhaar violates that fundamental right or not. So therefore, the whole issue was deferred to a 9-judge bench, which actually delivered a judgment, which declared and which overturned previous judgment and declared privacy as a fundamental right, equivalent to the right of life. And therefore, it was declared as fundamental right. So Aadhaar, in a way, was responsible for declaring privacy as a fundamental right, because that's how it got agitated. Now, a 5-judge bench thereafter decided whether this fundamental right is being violated by Aadhaar or not. That's interesting because, you are now examining an artifact on the basis of a law which has now, some judgment which has become a law now, and then you are saying whether it complies with it or not. But interestingly and thankfully, because we had taken all the steps to ensure privacy by design, the Supreme Court judgment, 1,300 pages judgment, declared that Aadhaar does not violate privacy unequivocally. It does not create a surveillance structure. It does not do profiling. And they answered 9 questions. 3 of these, profiling, privacy, security, they are important. And that is what has been settled. Now, the problem is that, in this country, people just keep on raising even the settled issues. After all, Supreme Court's decision declaring that Aadhaar does not violate this fundamental right called privacy, even then people continue to raise these issues. Now, if you raise these issues, what can you do? The point is, not even a single data has been breached from Aadhaar in the last 10 years. Not even a single biometric has gone out of Aadhaar database. Aadhaar database biometrics are kept separate, kept offline. So believe me, we are taking everything possible. Of course, there is no lock in the world which is 100% foolproof. So we are saying that, you need to take steps, because there will be hackers who will continue to try their new methods, and you have to be vigilant always relating to privacy, profiling, data security. But the kind of structure which we have created federated data model. For example, when you do authentication, the Aadhaar system does not know what for have you authenticated. So whether you are opening a bank account, or whether you are taking a credit, or whether you are taking a mobile SIM, Aadhaar system does not know, by the way. So therefore, it is actually just one-way street. You authenticate, Aadhaar says yes and no, and the rest is all domain. So basically, data does not reside in Aadhaar. Aadhaar is not creating a consolidated database, use database. It does not. It just has the citizens or the residents' primary data relating to their identity and nothing else. And as I explained in the beginning, it's an identity without eligibility. It does not give you any right, type, entitlement, etc. So therefore, by design, it has been kept as a privacy enhancing technology. I hope this answers the question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. May I now request Shri Sri Kshatriya ji to take Professor Rumki's questions.
Thank you. Professor Basu had asked 3 or 4 important questions. First is, how many states have enacted this kind of a legislation? And she was absolutely correct. There are about 20 states and 1 union territory which have enacted more or less similar legislation. But they have not provided the kind of reward and incentive systems that we have and set up a commission. Of late, there is a trend to create these kind of commissions. So in addition to 20 states which have enacted a law, 5 states in India have set up an independent commission to monitor it. In addition to Maharashtra, it is Punjab, Haryana, Uttarakhand, and West Bengal, which have set up these commissions. And in the last conference we held at Nagpur, if you remember, Srinivas and other officers, Meghalaya had Assam had informed that they are in the process of creating. So 5 states have commission and 20 states have a law. But the question was absolutely, correctly posed, is whether we have a central act for this. No, we don't have. And I would, it's my personal opinion, I would also agree that there's a need for considering whether we can have a central. If you remember the right to information, or if you remember the Lok Ayukta, all these started as state initiatives and later on became a national enactment. And all of us are aware that if it is a national enactment, it has a very good salutary effect in implementation in all states. So as of today, these are state legislations. There is no national act corresponding to them. The next question was whether the services are increasing or decreasing. Now, this number keeps fluctuating because sometimes what happens, for example, when GST was introduced in the country, a large number of services, for example, pertaining to entertainment duty and so on, they got subsumed into GST. So suddenly about 30, 40 services had to be denotified because it came into. Overall trend is to increase the number of services. There is a healthy competition among states. Punjab, Haryana keep asking us, sir, aapke kitne services hai? Maharashtra is around 486. They have crossed 500 now. So I'm telling Maharashtra government that you are no longer number 1. I mean, we got to notify more services. So yes, the overall number is increasing, but there have been occasions where because of legal changes, the number has come down uncertain. Now, whether penalties have been imposed, yes, the penalties can be imposed not only by the commission, the penalty can be imposed by the first appellate authority, by the second appellate authority, and by the commission. What kind of penalty? Monetary penalty, rupees 500 minimum and rupees 5,000 maximum, to be paid by the designated officer from his own salary. Government will not pay it. And we can recommend to the government, the commission has no authority to take departmental action because the appointing authority is the government. So the commission can recommend that departmental inquiry needs to be initiated against this officer. But what are the conditions is, not in every case of delay a penalty is to be imposed. The Act says, Act makes, madam, certain exceptions. For example, natural calamities is an exception. There is a drought condition, there is floods, there is a pandemic situation right now, or elections. We all know that when elections are to be conducted, whether parliament election or state election, the entire same administrative machinery is required to give first priority. So there are certain exceptions. So when the appeal comes that my service has been delayed, we go into these questions. There can be certain technical problems also. Connectivity is a big issue in some districts which are remote districts, forest areas. So we have to see all that. Only in case if it is a willful delay, if it is a delay for harassing the citizen and for a malified intention, penalty can be imposed. We have imposed penalty in several cases. I don't think I need to give the names, etc. of that. And why it is not a central act, I think Srinivas would be the best person to answer. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I will give the floor to, I have 2 more requests. I have a request from Professor Charu Malhotra from the Indian Institute of Public Administration. Professor Charu, can you please pose your question? She has a question for Dr. R.S. Sharma ji. Professor Charu. She's muted. Professor Charu, you're muted, please. Okay. We also have another question from Sri Balbir Singh Ji, Under Secretary in the Department of Administrative Reforms. Balbir Singh Ji.
Yes, sir. My question, answer to my question has already been covered by Mr. R.S. Sharma, sir. So he has already given clarifications on the security concerns. Thanks for that, sir.
Okay. Okay. Hello. Dr. Charu Malhotra's microphone may please be switched on. She says that she's not able to switch it on. She's calling me on the mobile, but please switch on her microphone. Hello. Yes, Professor Charu, can you hear me? No, her microphone is off, sir. We will come back to her queries. Sir, I would like to understand from you as to how much more can Aadhaar empower citizens. In 2020, we already have 1.24 billion enrollments, 582 million unique bank account holders, and also 850 million Aadhaar seeded accounts. How much more, say, circa 2025, where do you see Aadhaar progressing, or in terms of empowerment, an empowered citizen, how do you see it? The second is, I would also like to understand from you the handling of big data. In government, we are trained with rules, we're trained with a series of implementation activities and monitoring. How does, what is the skill base needed to handle this volume of big data? For example, today we process something like 27 lakh public grievances in the Department of Administrative Reforms. We were handling 1.5 lakh grievances, say 10 years earlier. So in terms of handling big data, how do we handle this volume of big data? That is the question I have for Sri R.S. Sharma ji. The second question I have for Sri Kshatriya ji is, to what extent do you see citizens holding service providers accountable under the Right to Services Act of Government of Maharashtra? Yes, Professor Charu is now connected, sir. Professor Charu, we can see you. Can you hear us? No, she still can't hear. So we'll take up this question and then Professor, we can go back to her. Sri R.S. Sharma.
Yeah,
sir.
Thank you very much, Srinivas. I think, again, these questions are extremely important. So one is, let me say that Aadhaar applications have just scratched their surface. You know, what is happening is Aadhaar has provided, one is direct service, another is a service to the nation in terms of the architecture. So one is Aadhaar provided the architecture to plug into various systems. You know, Mr. Kshatriya was talking about, you know, the pluggability of Aadhaar, pluggability of some other systems, and he was saying that, you know, other departments need to be told to, you know, Vahan and Sarthi, he was saying he's able to plug in. Now we have a policy in Government of India, and I was lucky to be working at that time as Secretary of the Department. There are three policies, a triad of policies. One is a policy on open API, which essentially talks that every application of the government must actually publish the APIs through which that application can be accessed through authorized accessing persons or entities. So actually, there is no, it is necessary, and that increases the, you know, sort of utility of that application. If you are able to just write a software which can, in a machine readable form, in a machine, you know, machine to machine communication can access. So for example, if you have a person who has got a driving license, he claims, and you want to verify whether the driving license is genuine or not, you straight away make an API call to the driving license, the Vahan, the Sarthi system, and immediately Sarthi system gives back to you the details of the driving system. Obviously, Sarthi system has to ensure that the person who is calling for that information is an authorized person, which is actually very easy. Some information can be publicly available, some can be available only to authorized user persons. So this, I think, open API policy is extremely important. The other policies are open standards and open, you know, sort of open source. So largely, you know, you should do open source writing of the programs. and open standards, on the basis of open standards. So that's one part. I fully support and concur, Mr. Kshatriya, that your Department of Administrative Reforms can actually make this part, that there is a policy of the government which talks of open API, and the APIs must be published. Aadhaar has published what is called an authentication API. They published authentication API 1.6 version when I was there, and now they have, I think the latest version is version 2.0. So we should publish these APIs. That's one question, answer to one question. Second is, I think the more acts. What has unfortunately happened is that the decision of the Supreme Court somehow, why? Because Aadhaar Act was passed as a part of the Finance Act. So what happened? The Supreme Court took a view that because it's a Finance Act and therefore it should concern the finance of the Government of India, which means all the applications which are actually using the consolidated money from the consolidated fund, they can utilize Aadhaar. For others, you need to have some specific acts and stuff like that. The Government of India had come up with an amendment, and now that Aadhaar Amendment Act is there, which actually says that anybody can voluntarily use Aadhaar. In my view, governance should not only now be implied with the government services. Governance should also mean that there are, let's say, private sector. Governance also means empowering the citizens. And empowering the citizens, if they have no problems in accessing the government services using Aadhaar, why should they have any problem in accessing private services also using Aadhaar? So, for example, proving their identity. Suppose somebody is having a bank account in the private bank, he should be able to use his identity. After all, right to identity is more powerful than the right to privacy. I mean, I have a right to prove that I am so and so. I mean, why should the government not provide me a document and Aadhaar is there that should be used? So essentially what has happened, there has been a thaw. There has been a kind of confusion in the minds of the people as to whether private sector can use Aadhaar or not. I think we should allow, because it's a public good. The first slide I said, it's a public good. And public good should not be limited only for the government use. Please understand, national highways are not made only for Sarkari vehicles to ply. Everybody should ply, and their utility does not decrease the more vehicles if they ply. In fact, in a digital public goods, it's even other way around. You build a lot of these databases. So that's one part. I think the Aadhaar, any system where you need to prove your identity in a digital way must leverage Aadhaar. There's no doubt. Health system, for example, you are building national digital health system. There also the digital health records will use Aadhaar. Similarly, you have these other systems, agriculture, education, everywhere. You must ensure that for proving identity, you must use paperless processes of electronic KYC, Aadhaar, authentication, e-sign, digital locker, all these services based on Aadhaar. So I think, in fact, there's no need for issuing physical documents as certificates by the NCERT or CBSE. They can just push your certificates, your mark sheets into your digital locker, and that's the end of the story. So I think similarly the cards, admit card, etc. Nothing. You can digitize the entire value chain using Aadhaar. And the last question, which I think the last part of the question was essentially, what are you doing with the data? It's a real good question, because what is happening, the private sector, the Googles of the world, the Facebook of the world, the Twitters of the world, they are actually calling for huge amount of data from you, something which they don't need. They are amassing data and they are monetizing your data. They are profiling you. They are actually more or less deciding your political choices. They are hacking your mind, so to say. They are doing all kinds of dirty stuff, Cambridge Analytica and stuff like that. Now, the government is having legitimately citizens' data, and they can actually use it for fine-tuning the further service delivery and actually a data-driven decision-based systems. That's what we should do. And we have huge data relating to all applications, revenue, public grievances. Mr. Kshatriya is talking about the grievances, the services. And I think what is the delivery time of services, which services are doing good, which services are not doing good, what are the kind of services, what should be the FAQs. Huge amount of data. We don't need to monetize the data, but we must certainly use the data in order to improve the delivery of the services, to improve the citizens, to empower the citizens. That's what we should be. I think a lot of work needs to be done. Similarly, the open data gov, for example, some data must be sort of released for researchers, released for this thing. The Open Data Gov initiative of the NIC has been there, but I think their systematic work needs to be done. And I think the work which can be done is by the Administrative Reforms Department, not so much by the IT or the NIC. So I think that's again another area where we should have an open data policy. Whatever data is a public data, non-personal data, how that data can be released to the ecosystem so as to have better research, better sort of predictions, better public policy making. And that needs to be done. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. May I now invite Shri Kshatriya ji for his comments, please. I think he's muted. So we can't hear. You're muted. Kindly unmute yourself.
Yeah. I was responding to your comment as to whether the commission found that the citizens are holding the designated officers and the administrators accountable after enactment of the law. I would say yes. And how do I say that? Look at the figures. Suppose the citizen wants A to be held accountable for not having delivered service within time or having rejected it without reason. What can he do? He has to file an appeal. So look at the figures of appeal. So if you look at the appeal figures right now, the latest figures I was looking at, in the state there have been more than 1,09,000 first appeals. So that means citizens are wanting to hold the designated officers responsible if they are delaying or if they are rejecting. Similarly, and there are three layers: first appeal, second appeal, and third appeal. Secondly, there have been 16,567 second appeals. And there have been 869 third appeal that is coming to the commission. Citizens are going in appeal, but I must also share another experiences that of the level of the commission, that the moment we admit an appeal and issue notice as to why there has been delay or why immediately our experience is that before the hearing is scheduled and before the hearing starts, the service would have been delivered. And then the citizen also says that, sir, we don't need to, we would not wish to pursue. But there are some citizens who say, no, I was harassed and I want to pursue it even after the service has been delivered. So it has been a mixed experience. And we look at it, as I said, with a view that only in cases of harassment, malafide intention, deliberate delay in which action is taken, but by the fact that more than 1 lakh first appeal, more than 16,000 second appeal, more than 800 third appeal, I would say that this is a proof that citizens are aware of the act and they would like the bureaucracy to be held accountable for delay or for arbitrary rejection. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We are almost at 1:30 now, 1:29. Dr. Charu, you want to pose the question, or we will seek a response from Ramsevak ji separately?
Sir, I'll leave it to the chair. Thanks a lot. So may I?
Yes, you could pose the question, but we are actually 1:30 when we close. That's why.
Perfect, sir. Thanks for the opportunity. Thanks, Sharma ji. It's always a pleasure. Sir, my concern is more about the advent of AI technologies in our existence, even in government sector. And this probably would lead to a possibility of citizen data being profiled by the state and center. Punjab has already come up with AI tracking systems for profiling criminals, which is, as you said, is very good for state security. But sir, how do we stop being Uncle Sam looking at us, the surveillance mode of state? So what kind of checks and balances through your vision you propose? Thank you.
Charuji, your concern is, can I answer Srinivas or?
Yes, I think you already answered it, but you could be.
I'll answer in half a minute. Don't worry. So yeah. I think your concern is absolutely fine. But let me tell you that technology is neither good nor bad. It is neither moral nor immoral. So AI as a technology, it depends how you utilize the AI. So basically to say that the government is going to butcher all of us because they will have more information is that absolutely, it is something which you say that strikes at the foundation of the basic democratic system itself. We have to trust the government, and I think what is being done is just by collecting the information, not really profiling us, we are actually utilizing, and we can utilize AI on the anonymized data. We are not applying AI, as you know, is a technique which is applied largely on the population sets, in large data sets, not really individually. So the AI will give you the trends. For example, if somebody picks up the phone and the probability that he or she is having a problem in revenue is more, and that AI will determine and the response, and accordingly the systems will be geared towards attending to that kind of problem. So this is, I think, AI can be used for good purpose, and let us not always believe that, otherwise you will stop all technologies. After all, today mobile phones are used for tracking the criminals, and then you can say, you are profiling the criminals, and therefore it's a bad idea. Now it can be used for phone tapping. It can also be used for good things. So I think technology there should be appropriate checks and balances to use the technology, and AI is no exception. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. We've had a very engaging discussion. I'll now request Professor Poonam Singh to deliver the vote of thanks.
Yes, sir. We have a very short time. Thank you so much, sir. History is going to remember these great initiatives, and paperless, presenceless, and cashless initiatives. So wonderful, sir. So first of all, NCGG extremely grateful and thankful to our lead speakers, respected Ram Sevak Sharma sir and Swadhin Kshatriya sir, for great discussions and sharing the process, implementations, and citizens' advantages. And secondly, I would like to, we are very, I think, I can say that I would like to give, I think, the heartiest thanks to our Director General Sri V. Srinivas sir, that during these series, we felt that he has conceptualized this vision to have the webinar on the special subjects on the good governance issues, and we are conducting this series. So thank you so much, sir. We are having a great Director General in our institute. And I would like to extend our special thanks to our esteemed participants, especially the academicians from the institution and universities, the district collectors, DCs from their districts. I have already seen that they have already joined, and the officers from the DRPGs, the faculties from IIMs, and my colleague from NCGG, and the persons who are involved in these initiatives and working very hard in NCGG. So thank you so much. All the, I think, the great speakers and all the participants. Have a nice day and Merry Christmas.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.